Sure. And this larger consciousness system, as it evolved, well, maybe I can say this quickly. Evolution of a information system is based on lowering entropy. Information, well, let's say this. If there's no information, it means all the bits are random. Okay, that's no information. If some of your bits are structured in a pattern, in a design, to mean something, now you have information. So information is structure as opposed to randomness. If that structure goes away and there's nothing but randomness, the information's gone away. So an information system evolves, creates more useful, more significant information. That's how you evolve as an information system, by lowering its entropy, changing random bits into structured, meaningful, significant bits. So we have this larger consciousness system, and what it's trying to do is evolve. And the way it evolves is much like the way our biology evolved. It evolved through experience. Well, if it's just a monolithic thing, experience is very limited. So just as our biology did, it broke itself into pieces, like we had one cell and then we had multiple celled things, multiple celled animals of some sort, creatures, and the same here. So this conscious system evolves, broke itself into pieces so that these pieces could interact with each other. Well, breaking into pieces provides a lot of novelty, a lot of interaction, a lot of new ways of interacting, because now it's various pieces, each with free will, interacting with other pieces, and it's really hard to tell how that's going to get out because they're all have free will. Okay, so that's us. We are these individual units of consciousness, not our bodies, our consciousness. Our consciousness is in this non-physical reality with this non-physical computer, all of which we call consciousness, and this body and this bush and everything here in this physical universe of ours is virtual. It's a virtual reality. That's what the experiments in physics are telling us. It's based on information. It's not what we thought it was. It's information based. So here we are now. We're not the fundamental reality. We're just a virtual reality. And who are we? We the body? No, see, that's wrong. We the consciousness. We're the consciousness. And we're getting data over a data stream from a computer, and we interpret it as this reality. So then that's kind of in a nutshell what my theory says. Okay, well, when you realize that, you realize now there's a purpose to this. The larger consciousness system has to reduce its entropy in order to survive. So if you don't work at reducing entropy, entropy just increases. To reduce entropy, you have to keep making an effort to reduce entropy. So the system has to continue to evolve and reduce entropy. So it breaks apart to have all these pieces to give it novelty. So now we have purpose. Well, what's our purpose? Our purpose here is to reduce entropy. Well, what does that mean? In a social system where you have interacting entities and their job is to reduce entropy, it turns out that they do that most effectively in their social interaction with cooperation, with caring, you see? And I had that under love. Okay? Caring and cooperation, I guess, are two of the main ideas. On the opposite end or the way that they could interact would be fear. Fear is the opposite of love. And if you had a social system and all of the pieces were interacting with fear, that would raise entropy. With fear, there's no trust. With fear, it's all about me. It's me against everybody else. What can I get? And then how can I keep it? And then I have trouble keeping it in this kind of law of the jungle world. So me and others will get together to form a little mutual defense pact so that we can keep our stuff and we won't steal each other's. And other mutual defense pacts do, and then there's war between those. And you see that I'm kind of describing where we live, right? That's the fear-based reality. Well, that doesn't that doesn't grow very well, because if somebody builds something up, somebody else tears it down. or gets rid of them and takes it over. Then somebody else tears it down. You see, there's all this me, gimme going on, and that doesn't produce lower entropy. That produces higher entropy. Cooperation. How can we help? How can we work together to produce something that optimizes a social system's interactions? Okay. So our purpose then becomes to become love, to become cooperative, to become caring, make it about other more than about self. And that becomes our purpose of us as individuated units of consciousness. So that ends up not only explaining our virtual reality that had to be here to be a schoolhouse for individuated units of consciousness. Why do we need a schoolhouse? Well, if it wasn't for this virtual reality, what would we be? We'd be a bunch of individuated units of consciousness just chatting with each other. Think of a chat room with, 7.5 billion people in the chat room, no rules, just a chat room. And we're supposed to take those choices that we make in this chat room and grow up from them. Well, there's no traction. How can you grow up when you have no idea whether anybody's telling you the truth, whether the effect of the information you send, they don't know the effect of the information you receive. There's just no traction, no feedback in the system. Well, the way you get feedback is by making rules. Make the system such that there's constraints in the system and how people have to deal with the constraints, and make it a multiplayer game so that they interact with each other and have to deal with the constraints of each other and with the stuff. So the more rules, the tighter rules you make, then the more physical it looks like. So we're in a rule set that's pretty tight. It's called our physics. That's the rule set. And we can only interact here according to our rule set. I can't jump 100 feet in the air because the rule set doesn't support it. See, it's that sort of thing. So we have to abide by our physics. So our bodies, our physical systems, are avatars, just information on a hard drive. Our consciousness is non-physical to us, but it's a more fundamental reality than this reality. See, we're not in the fundamental reality, we're in a computed reality. Our consciousness is the fundamental reality. We're here so that we can make choices, because by the choices we make, we either increase entropy or decrease entropy. If we're going to evolve our consciousness, and I call that evolve the quality of our consciousness, we need to decrease entropy. That's what the system does. That's how the system stays alive. That's how it lowers its entropy. So we've got a job to do, and it's to become love. Now, how does one go about that? So I'm kind of quickly going through the parts of the theory, but how does one do that? Well, one finds out that if you're in a reality game like this one, and you're in this schoolhouse, we could call it a entropy reduction trainer, sort of like a flight trainer that the pilots get into. This is an entropy reduction trainer. And if you are increasing entropy, you're going the wrong direction. You're creating a problem rather than part of the solution. And when you do that, things just don't work out very well. If you're in the world of Warcraft and you just don't play the game right, you do things that are all counterproductive, you just don't get anywhere. You see, the game is made for a reason. So we have fear. Fear creates two other things. It creates ego, I want, I need, and it creates beliefs. If you have fear that there's something important you need to know, but you don't know it, well, then you can just believe it, because the fear of the unknown is worse than, just making a belief and live with it. So we create a lot of beliefs with our fears. So the ego, the fear, the beliefs are what we need to overcome. And as we overcome, we evolve the quality of our consciousness. So individuals who have a higher quality consciousness, they tend to live in a state of happiness. They enjoy life. love, caring. They're very positive people that mostly positive things happen to. People who are bound up with their fear and their ego and their beliefs tend to be unhappy people who are kind of miserable because they're trying to swim against the current, if you will. They're doing the wrong thing in this entropy reduction trainer. Yeah, there's games like there's rules, and that's just the way it works. So when you are, your ego causes you misery. If it's all about you, you'll probably never be a very happy person. If what you do in life is manipulate other people to be the way you need them, to manipulate events and things and people and processes to be the way you know is best, to be the way you want them to be, you are driven by your fear and ego, you're not going to be a very happy person. You're going to always be frustrated because as you try to manipulate things, you can't succeed. You see, it never succeeds. You try and try and try, but it never happens. Things and people and processes are always doing stuff other than what you want, and you just can't ever get to hear from there, so you're frustrated, you're not satisfied, you're unhappy, you're angry, and so on, and that's not a very nice life. Yeah, so it's basically the idea that we are here to lower entropy is a part of the theory that explains consciousness. It also explains physics. So I say we derive physics from this theory, and we have a purpose, and that purpose is to grow up, and morality is part of that purpose. We're back to the good versus evil, right? Which is a theme of everything. Well, it's a theme of everything. Our literature, our plays, everything we do is this good versus evil is the theme. Well, that's the theme, you see. The good is to lower your entropy. The evil is to raise your entropy. So the whole thing is this struggle of good and evil. We come here with the idea that we're going to lower it. And if we make good choices, every time we make a choice, that choice will either lower entropy a little or raise it a little. If the choice is one out of anger, it's going to raise it a little. If it's one out of caring, it's going to lower it a little. It's going to make everything work better if it's out of caring. So this is the nature. Yes, that's why. Because we are evolving our quality. As we do good, we feel better. Our life gets better. And if you can build a good quality consciousness, you live in a happy place. There's joy in things. It's a matter of everything that happens to you. And here's a real short way of looking at life. I'll kind of back up a bit. Here's a short way of looking at life. Stuff happens, and we get to deal with it. That's life. That's everybody's life. Stuff happens, and we get to deal with it. We put all of our focus on manipulating the stuff that happens. We want to make sure that everything that happens is the way we want it to happen. So we struggle to manipulate that. Well, that's the wrong thing to be putting your focus on. What you should focus on is, how do you deal with it? You deal with it with caring, love, with compassion, then you're going to grow. Your life will get better, and you will be a happier, more satisfied individual. If you're constantly trying to manipulate to make it the way you want it, well, that's ego. And why are you doing that? Because you fear it being some way other than the way you want it. You see, so that's the fear and the ego, or you believe that it needs to be that way. It's a belief. It must be that way for some reason. So that's the nature of our reality. That's why we're here. That's our purpose. That's what makes us happy or miserable. We make all of our own misery. And one of the points in this reality, and I won't try to derive it, there's not time for that, but there's feedback. A good schoolhouse has to give the students feedback. And one of the instruments of feedback is that we get to modify future probability. Future's not a done deal. We have free will, but there is a probability of things that can happen in the future, and we get to modify that probability with our intent. So intent modifies future probability. The system calculates future probability based on past actions and what's possible. So it looks at all the things that are possible and what the probability of them happening is. Now, every time we increment this simulation one time unit, one delta t, some things we'll have to recalculate because free will choices are made and what's probable and what's possible might change from time to time. So that's an ongoing, changing, volatile field out there, but it's there anyway. That gives the system some ability to anticipate what's happening next, so it can get ready, and it gives us feedback. There's also this past database, which is, as time goes on, that probable future turns into the past. And it's everything that could have happened and the probability that it might have, plus our history thread, which is what we did, what we actually did. Okay, so we have this future probability database. We can change the probability of what's to happen next. Now, I don't mean that we can make it be whatever we want. We can just modify it. We can change it. So perhaps if it was 1,000,000 to 1, and we try really, really hard, we can get it down to 1,001. Huge change, but still not likely to happen, you see. So you can't just get what you want, but you can change things. And where there is uncertainty, you can make the changes. Where there's little uncertainty, there's not much room for change because you can only change things within the natural uncertainty of the problem. Okay, so this explains a whole lot of things. It explains things like the placebo effect. Why does the placebo effect work? Well, it's because usually it's with medicine. That's because a doctor tells somebody that they've got this wonderful medicine and it's bound to make them well. Well, that's a very positive intent. They feel good about that. I got this great medicine, I'm going to get better. That positive intent actually helps them get better. Not just think that they're going to get better or just think they feel better when they really aren't any better, but actually makes them heal better. That's a placebo effect. Well, that's intent modifying future probability. And this happens to all of us. One of the outcomes of this is that this world we live in is really, in many ways, created by us. Because what we get is what our intentions are. Because we're nudging or helping things to come into the reality, the future to come into to our reality in the present based on our intents. So if you look around at the world and you see, gosh, what an awful place. There's wars, everybody's fighting, people are trying to take advantage, there's greed, everybody's ripping off everybody else, and you look at this, that's us. That is an accurate description of the average level of entropy or consciousness quality amongst human beings. So that's us. And when we get better, all that will get better. And if we don't get better, that won't get better. So to try to make it better here, what you should do is work on yourself. You can't change anybody but yourself. So we can go out and take that government office or take that dictator or take that monetary system or whatever that we think is the problem and change it. But if we, the people, don't change the quality of our consciousness, in a very short time it'll go back just to the way it was. It's going to be abusive again. It doesn't matter. Sure, you put somebody in there who's a wonderful person, but that wonderful person doesn't live forever. And normal people eventually come and whatever, and it's going to get just the way it was. So trying to fix it from the outside. Let's go fix the outside. Let's go fix the politicians. Let's go fix, our neighbors or people who aren't nice. Let's go fix them. It doesn't work. All that works is if we fix ourselves. It's the only person that we can fix. And if we do that, that's our maximum contribution to fixing it all. Now, it doesn't mean that you should sit back and not take part in things. Sure, go out and protest, carry your sign, make a lot of noise, because that's educational. And as long as that's educational to help other people see a bigger picture, well, then that'll help move us to change. So yes, get involved, but you have to realize that the point here is education. Not burning something down, not, executing the bad guys, not replacing the president or whatever. That's not the key. The key is to educate people so that they see the bigger picture. And as they grow up, our institutions, governments, economic systems, they will get kinder and gentler as we get kinder and gentler. And they will not get kinder and gentler if we don't get kinder and gentler. So it's up to us, you see. And like I say, your maximum contribution is to get yourself improved to a higher quality consciousness. So that's kind of the big picture with physics and where I started. And basically virtual reality is the key to this idea. It answers all the mail, and I mean by that it runs, it connects all the dots in science, in philosophy. The Buddha said that this is all illusion. Maya, it's just illusion. Well, this is a virtual reality. But it was pretty close to being right on then. We've probably heard the expression that, love is the answer. It's all about love and caring and other people. Well, that's true. That's what it is. We hear things like, we're all one. Well, yes, this is a larger consciousness system, and we are all connected, and we're all netted. So we can communicate to each other through this consciousness net, if you will. That's where the Jungian archetypes come from, our inner communication with everybody. So a culture, the people that all identify with that culture, they're all connected in a way with their consciousness. You see, so that's how you learn through your culture that this reality is just physical. Well, it's not true, but it's a cultural belief. So you just get it. You get it out of the air. Nobody explains it to you. It's just there. It's part of your consciousness. Well, we're always, if we're here, if we have an avatar here, we, consciousness, are playing this avatar. I'm playing this body, you're playing that body, and we are really consciousness having a conversation because this is a multiplayer game and it's running through the consciousness computer. Yeah, we're players and we're interacting, so we're playing with each other just like people on the internet. They all play World of Warcraft together. So we're players. And this whole life experience, I call it an experience packet that we have from when we are born to when we die, we are the player of this avatar. When we die, consciousness doesn't die any more than the player playing World of Warcraft dies. When the elf dies, well, the elf, what do they do in World of Warcraft? They run back to the graveyard or something and get its stuff, go back and get back in the game. What we do is have to recycle. We also get back in the game. Why? It's a logical requirement because learning has to be cumulative. You can't learn something that's really complex and difficult in just one shot. You don't learn anything in one shot. You have to learn A before you learn B, before you learn C. It's a cumulative process that's iterative. And it takes us iterations because becoming love is not a trivial thing to do. It's change of ourself at the being level. So it takes more and more iterations. But then that's our job. You see, we, consciousness, we individuated units of consciousness playing in this virtual entropy reduction trainer, we're part of the larger consciousness system strategy for survival. Strategy for lowering its entropy. And we need this virtual reality so we have feedback, so we can really make decisions that mean something to us, that we see the results of these decisions. We get a reality that reflects us. Now that tells us how we're doing. Go read a newspaper and look at the evening news. That's how we're doing. So we get this feedback. So that's us. So we die. We, the consciousness, don't die. We just continue on, and eventually we end up in another experience packet, and born and die in another experience packet, because this kind of learning is cumulative. It's possible, yes. Sometimes we do. Sometimes an individuated unit of consciousness will have two players going. Well, it's just when you think in terms of digital information systems, there's a huge amount of flexibility there. So you can do almost anything in a digital system. So yes, it's not the norm. It doesn't happen as much as not, but yes, sometimes a player will have multiple incarnations, we'll call an incarnation or experience packet at the same time. And sometimes multiple players will work together. They will incarnate as a group, if you will, such that they can interact with each other because they have found that they are good at bringing out the things that need to be brought out in each other. That happens. But again, that's not the norm either. It depends where you are in this process of evolution. If you're at the beginning, then you just need experience. So you jump in, jump out. No, it can't be in the past. Time is a fundamental thing. Time comes in just with the idea of consciousness and choice and with the idea of evolution. Okay? If there are choices, then there must be time. If there's evolution, there must be time. See, if you have a choice, then there was what there was before you made the choice and what you had after to make the choice, because the choice makes a difference. So there's a before and after state. If you've got a before and after state, you've got time. If you're going to evolve, then you're changing from this state to that state. Evolution requires time. Time is very fundamental. So time moves forward. Progress moves forward. And the past is not evolving. It's just a record. Okay? The past, the characters in the past, our past, okay, is probability models of us. It's all of us, not just the things we did, but everything we thought, everything we felt, everything about us is then in that past record. Yeah, no, they're not all to the same clock, but they all are moving in the same direction, because the virtual reality is computed and it has an outer time loop, so that every delta t it goes and recalculates everything. And on your computer, that's called a refresh rate. If it's an older computer, 60 times a second, your computer gets refreshed, which means all the pixels get, recalculated. The intensity and the color all get recalculated. Every pixel, every 1/60th of a second. That's the delta t I'm talking about. So our virtual reality has that delta t, that is its refresh rate, and that's specified in order to produce the time resolution that we need here to make this a smooth, good virtual reality. Just like there's also a delta x that specifies the resolution in space.
So Planck time and Planck space.
Planck time, Planck space, you divide space by time, you get a velocity. And that is the speed of light, because the time, the delta t time, has to be a constant, because you can't have a refresh rate that's all over the place. Otherwise, your reality is very weird, very squirrely. It's not the kind of good learning lab. And you can't have space that comes in, pixels that are big pixels and little pixels, because everything gets distorted like a funhouse mirror. Everything's distorted in space. So the delta t needs to be a constant, and the delta x needs to be a constant. Planck length, Planck time, divide them, you get c. So that's the constant. That's why C is the constant. Now, I just use the Planck length, Planck time just because they're there, and physics says that they are about the point where space becomes granular. Space becomes granular at about Planck length, and the time becomes granular at about Planck time. So I just use those. Now, it may turn out to be something other than those, but let's talk about those because that's our best guess, right, at this time. But in any case, a virtual reality needs a delta t and a delta x to specify the resolution both in time and space. That's what you start with, because that specifies the throughput and the memory requirements of the computation. So what you're here to do, if you want to know, well, what should I do? What does this mean to me? Then what it means to you is that what you're here to do is to get rid of your fear and get rid of your ego and grow up. And that will make your life better and everybody else's life better as well. That's being part of the solution. If you don't do that, then you're part of the problem. So if you want to be part of the solution, we need to get rid of that fear. How do you get rid of fear? Well, fears are hard to find because most of our fears are buried down in our subconscious and we don't even know they're there, but they push us around all the time. The way to do this is instead of going after the fear directly, realize that the fear creates your ego and your beliefs. Well, beliefs are kind of sacred to people and they don't want to question them. So that leaves us with the ego as a good way to approach this. So when do you have ego? When are you exhibiting ego? It's whenever you feel negative. If you're angry, if you're upset, if you're anxious, if you have anxiety, if you're frustrated. See, all of these things are negative feelings and they all are fear-based. But they are an expression of ego. It's about you. The fear is always about I. It's always about self. So the ego is concerned with self. So if you have any of these negative feelings, if you feel unhappy, if you feel, unlovable, if you feel incompetent, if you are unsure, if you are insecure, well, all of this is ego. Trace the ego back to find the fear that creates the ego. That's how you'll find the fear. And when you find that fear, the only antidote for fear is courage. So when you find that fear, first it'll help you just to know what the fear is rather than this thing, driving you out of your subconscious. It's just to name the fear and say, oh, this is my fear. That's why I have this ego. That's why I act this way. That's why I need it to be that way. That's why you make me angry. Well, you don't make me angry. I choose to be angry, you see. You have to take responsibility for your choices. If you're angry, it's because you choose to be angry. You could choose to be some other way besides angry. But you're probably not aware of that because your fears and all that are buried someplace, and anger is what you get. Okay, so when you find out what the source of this anger is and the fear and understand it, then accept it. Just say, okay, if I'm incompetent or if I am insecure, I'll say I'm incompetent. If I'm incompetent, then I accept that. I'm just not very good at what I'm doing. I'm not very good at life. I'm not very good at being a parent, or I'm not very good at my job or something, and that's a fear of mine. So I fake it all the time. I act like I'm really good, and I kind of dare people to challenge me because that's how I deal with this fear. Okay, so just admit it. Say, I accept it. I'm just not that competent, but I'm going to go and do the best I can anyway, and as maybe I can learn to be more competent. Because once you admit the fear, then it's easy to become more competent. As long as you're in denial that that's a problem, it's impossible to become more competent. So then you work on that. But once you accept it, you've basically pulled its teeth. It can't bite you anymore because you accept it. Okay, that's the way I am. So now you don't have to hide it. You don't have to run from it. You don't have to deny it. You've accepted it. Now you can deal with it. You see, instead of be bullied by it and pushed around by it, you can deal with it. And you deal with it by just letting it go. And what you'll find out is that it's a paper tiger. There wasn't any teeth in that mouth anyway. And you really weren't all that incompetent. You just had this fear of being incompetent. Why? I don't know. When you were 6 years old, maybe everybody kept telling you everything you did was wrong. And you just got this feeling, you see, that you were incompetent. So you carry that fear around with you. So you find out it's a paper tiger with no teeth. And then the load comes off and you feel so much better. And now it's much easier for you to grow your competence. because you're no longer struggling with this fear. So that's kind of the way it works. So that's how to do it. Find the ego, find all those times when you feel negative, trace it back to the fear, accept the fear, and let it go. Have the courage. Here's where the courage comes in. You have to have the courage to accept that fear and then go on anyway. And that takes a lot of courage. It's not, it's easy to say, it's harder to do. But if you do that, you'll find those fears will just melt away. And don't try to work on them all at once. Just one at a time is good enough. And it's interesting. I typically run into mostly young men more than young women who tell me, I don't have any ego and I don't have any fear. And I tell them, well, do you ever have any negative feelings? You ever get angry, upset, think you're being abused, or saying it right? And they say, oh yeah, I got plenty of that. So I say, well, follow that and see if you can't find a fear. And then I hear back from them about 3 months later, and it's like, oh my God, I found out that everything I do is based on ego and fear. I'm totally controlled by my ego and fear. And if you look at it, that will be what most people will find out. They're totally controlled by their ego and by their fear and by their beliefs.
But we're here to learn.
Yeah, we're here to learn. And just pick one, pick a small one, and work on it, get rid of it, then pick the next one. This is a lifetime job. This is not something that you should figure you're going to get done in a week. This is something you get partially done in a lifetime. So we just work on it. That's the thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it exactly right. Am I approaching this right? Is this what's going on? Just do it. Just do it and follow your intuition and you'll see the result. And the result will be that you will be a much happier, you will be a more joyful person, and so will everybody else that interacts with you. Because as you grow up, you help other people feel better as well. So that's like, what should I tell people about, what they can do to change themselves, which will eventually change the world.